large margin, but again by a colossal number. And
Did
the
she?
people who are voting against it are obviously the DUP, but also the far right of her own party, because they look at it and see it for what it is, which is a terrible deal. But it's the backstop specifically that is their complaint, because it will prevent them. It will prevent us as a country being able to conduct our own independent trade deals. We will be subject to whatever deals the EU make, but they will make them in their favour, not ours. We'll be a third country.
And yeah, what's the point of doing Brexit if you're not able to fully operate on your own kind of like free independent trade deals, right?
Quite exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a pointless endeavour. But the suspicion is that before Theresa May was Prime Minister, she used to be Home Secretary for a very long time. And she really only had one kind of mission when she was Home Secretary, which is her sensitivity around immigration. Now, this is, in the UK, has been a very sensitive topic for a very long time, as it is in the US. And the suspicion is, or my personal belief is, that what Theresa May is doing here is she's essentially trying to do her old job, that being reducing immigration under the terms of her job as Home Secretary, and that's it. It has a single overriding obsession is to reduce the number of immigrants in this country. Now, we're a small country, and we are in Europe. We need immigration. We're a country like your own that's founded on immigration. So the idea of closing off our access to people from Europe in order to be able to add value to our industries. I think there are really two measures of a country's economic performance, and that one is their productivity, and the other is the size of their population. End of. That's why China is such a big deal, and why Germany's economy is bigger than others. They're incredibly productive, and they've got a lot of people in it.
So it is. Yeah, you do need always important to have that kind of like new flow of labor, and it's interesting because
absolutely,
I've watched some like videos, heard some reports of people who have been saying, we just need to stop those immigrants, especially in the campaign, the lead up to the campaign, which obviously drew a lot of similarities from Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson were saying a lot of the same thing as Donald Trump was saying at the time, kind of like a lot of like anti-Muslim immigration, not
rhetoric,
really anti-Hispanic. Just kind of like anti-Hispanic over here, or anti-Mexican and anti-Latin American, because I think that back then was like kind of the height of the Syrian refugee and European migrant crisis, and
yes,
and that kind of led to kind of similar rhetoric.
Yes,
and you said no one really expected these guys who to win the campaign. David Cameron didn't expect it. A lot of people on the left wing of British politics didn't expect it. So how do you think they pulled it off? What has Britain learned more about the people who ran the Leave campaign?
Well, there are several reasons. First of all, 2 million people voted in that referendum that normally never vote in elections ever, right? So a disenfranchised, so a disenfranchised chunk of people in this country were encouraged to vote. Now, the reason why they're disenfranchised is because our voting system in this country is called first past the post. It's quite a medieval system. Works really well when there are no computers, which is basically everyone votes for whoever they want on a piece of paper, writes down their name, and whoever gets the most votes wins, and they take the seat. Now, this lack of proportional representation means that marginal voices or more fringe voices have no representation. UKIP can get 25% of the vote, no MPs. I'm a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, which might do similarly well, 8 MPs. So people, quite rightly, look at our political system, our electoral system, and think it's broken and no longer fit for purpose. Now, one of the prices that the Tories paid for going into coalition with the Liberal Dems after the 2010 general election was a referendum on the matter of proportional representation. But because no one cared at that point, no one really understood it, that didn't get through. So the reason why in the referendum, for the Brexit referendum, that so many additional people voted is because they thought, finally, at last, I'm going to be heard one way or another. My vote will be counted, because of course it was. So that was one thing. The second thing is that for 40 years, the press here, the right-wing press, have just hounded and beaten on the idea of Europe as being a force of evil. Europe is a political and legal framework. It's designed after the Second World War to prevent wars of that nature. Completely misunderstood. The Remain campaign made no attempt to celebrate the benefits and of being a member of the EU. How could they? Because they themselves have been beating up on the EU. It's been a whipping boy in the press here for so long. So the Remain campaign was essentially a fear-based project. It was Project Fear. It was just like, if we leave, it'll all go wrong. Whereas the Leave campaign is a much simpler story to tell, much more emotional. We're taking back control. We'll have our own destiny. We'll be British, and all the things which we used to rely.
We'll get our country back, kind of a thing that they say a lot here in the United States.
Absolutely, it's very similar. There are so many aspects to our lives now where we no longer have the sense of identity that we once might have had. Our trade unions have gone. Our churches aren't what they were. Families are fractured. So anything that would give a sense of identity and purpose to somebody who's feeling really disenfranchised is very welcome. So there's that, and then of course there's the political interference which you had in your election. In this instance, the vote leave did break the law, and overspent on Facebook ads, big time. Lots of collusion. Russia is involved, of course. The tragedy is that all this has come to light. Vote leave have been fined. It's all been agreed that the whole thing was completely bogus. If it were a legally binding referendum, then it would be overturned by law. The tragedy is that it was not legally binding. It was an advisory referendum. The only thing that is legally binding is the triggering of Article 50. That is a matter of law. That's the problem. And so, however, fucked up sorry, excuse my French. Sorry, listeners. The referendum was. It's the triggering of Article 50 that is that was the killer note.
Yeah, so they at least had to come in there and do that. It's very interesting though. You mentioned the collusion that they happened. I was like, I didn't know there was, and it doesn't really get covered a lot because over here we've had a lot of talk of collusion, a lot of yelling from the at least Democratic side, but no one's really completely gotten nailed for collusion over here yet. I did hear though, similar to the UK, similar to the US, I may be wrong, was Cambridge Analytica involved in
oh yes,
this at all?
Yeah, very very much so. Some shady and dodgy businessmen, Aaron Banks, so on and so forth. Nigel Farage, obviously his fingerprints are all over it. But these people have been investigated and found guilty and fined.
Yeah, that's got to be at least somewhat reassuring for the British people. But I'm sure for a lot of people, what would be reassuring is possibly if the other side was bogus, a second referendum, or as they say now, a people's vote, which has been discussed to some degree. And I mean, I don't know who. I'm not sure too much of who supported, but I know it's a lot of kind of like Labour. But maybe not so much at the top. How is a people's referendum kind of faring in British politics right now? Does it kind of like wide popular support? Or?
It goes in and out like the tide, really. I've been on several Brexit marches, the last of which there was, 750,000 people in central London, asking for a people's vote. The people's vote has been supported from the outset by the Liberal Democrats, which is the party I belong to. And since then, it has gained widespread support. However, there are serious difficulties with it. The first is that although Jeremy Corbyn claims he supports it, and he is obliged to support it because the membership support it, the Labour membership is absolutely committed to a people's vote, absolutely committed to remaining in Europe. And the intrigue around Corbyn is that he's a Brexiter, so he's not paying attention to his own party and his own rules. So although he said...
This doesn't seem very enthusiastic about supporting people's vote, even though he kind of has to.
No, he could change his mind around it. But the plain fact of the matter is this, is that if there were a second referendum, it would destroy both the Labour Party and the Tory Party in their current form, because both of these parties are irrevocably split. They're no longer fit for purpose, neither of them. Both parties have Remain wings and Leave wings, both of them. And so therefore it would not be possible for either political party to campaign coherently on a Brexit issue. They just could not. So therefore it would split them. And those splits and cracks have already started to appear.
Yes.
Within the Tory party. The ERG group is a group within. It has its own leader, its own whip, own policy. And within the Labour Party, obviously there's Momentum, which is, Corbyn supporter. Group. But there's also Tom Watson's kind of moderate, who's the deputy. He's got formally arranging his own moderate group. And there have now been, exactly, the independent group has seen Labour MPs and Tory MPs both leave. And that process would gather a pace if there were a second referendum.
Yeah, that'd be definitely very interesting, because they're just like the Democrat and Republican parties. They're both the Republican Party not as much, but there's been a lot of kind of dividing between, at least here in America, of the Democratic Party and the left, between more centrist edge and a more left-wing edge. And I really just get a sense from what I've seen is that Corbyn kind of wants to focus more on kind of anything but Brexit. He likes to focus on like policy issues. Although Brexit obviously is a very important policy issue, but that's not. I feel like that's not the thing he wants to talk about most. Would that be a fair kind of statement to say?
Absolutely, he's conspicuously avoided talking about it because it's such a toxic issue and such a divisive issue. And what Labour is trying to do is to say that they respect the result of the referendum, because obviously there's a lot of people in this country still who, are for Brexit. They really are. And a lot of them are in Labour heartland seats. And so Labour, understandably, is sensitive about becoming a one-issue party. And so he too is trying to have his cake and eat it. But his strategy thus far has been to say that they support a softer version of Brexit, which would have full membership of the Customs Union. But also, and here's the comedy, that they would be able to negotiate a departure which also retained all the benefits of membership. This is we're right back to cake and eat it.
Kind of like Brexit, but in name only, just saying like we did Brexit, but not really.
Well, it's not even that. It's what he's trying. Brexit in name only doesn't really exist, because it can't, because Brexit is. The EU is a legal and political, primarily a legal framework, and therefore, if you are in the club, you are going to have more benefits than if you are not in the club. Because if you're not in the club, you do not contribute money, so you can't have something for which you do not pay. And so the Labour position is disingenuous. But yeah, you're right. What he's trying to do is like the art of war. It's just like when you do not interrupt your enemy when you see them make a mistake. And clearly the Tory party have made many mistakes, but all the way down here, they've been aided and abetted by Corbyn, who, it must never be forgotten, whipped his party to vote for the Article 50. And it's Article 50 that is the thing that's triggered Brexit, not the referendum. So he's complicit in this. He owns this as much as she does, as far as I'm concerned.
What was his motivation for whipping the party to support Article 50?
I think there are two motivations. The first is that he wants to destroy the Tory party, and obviously Brexit will. But the second thing is that he himself is, he's not so much a socialist as a Marxist. He's a lifelong Marxist, and he has very, very strong ideological objection to the EU on the basis that he sees it as a capitalist club. Very, very strong feelings about it, and is of the view, wrongly in my mind, that he would not be able to create this country in his image if we were within the EU, that the laws would prevent it. I don't think he's right, actually. I think that, curiously, this country, I was talking to my son about this, I was talking to Ollie about this only this morning when I said I was going to be speaking with you. I think this country is naturally socialist after the Second World War. I think, by and large, we're a socialist country, but by and large, we've been run by capitalist parliaments in the round.
It was like, so, at least with in recent history, with like Tony Blair and Cameron.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So So, we're constantly in the situation where we've got it's like George Orwell said, I mean, to be English